In section 2.1, we're going to start to take a look at different types of data and begin to kind of add a little bit more to the large number of definitions that we've already been forming. As you see here at the beginning, we're going to start with three different definitions. And the first one here is going to be very, very important. The idea of variables. Now, as the definition here states, variables are really just specific characteristics of the individuals within the population. So when we think about a variable, this is again very much like a what style question when we are looking at a particular study. A variable is the piece of information that I'm interested in knowing about the individuals. So I often think about variables as being formulated into questions. So like if I wanted to go around the room and ask people what was their favorite color, then what their favorite color was would be a variable, right? It's the piece of information I want to know. If I want to ask them how old they are, then that would be a different piece of information or a different variable. Now, variables can be kind of broken down into two subcategories, and you can see this in the definition as well as in the corresponding picture. We'll have some variables that will be further classified as qualitative, and other variables that will be classified as quantitative. You'll see down here that loosely speaking, a qualitative variable is something that is going to be categorical. That is, it allows for a classification of individuals based on an attribute or some characteristic. If you think about it in terms of a question that's being posed, a question that deals with a variable that's qualitative would require some sort of like a word type response as opposed to a number like response. So when I talk about a quantitative variable, these are going to be questions that require some numerical value answer. However, the values that I get back have to also be thought of and be treated like values that are numerical, meaning that when I ask a quantitative question, maybe like, how old are you? The answers that I get back are numbers, and I can think about adding, subtracting those numbers and actually like getting meaningful results. So we're going to see kind of how this works and hopefully make this a bit clearer down in example number 1. We're going to be trying to determine whether each of the following variables are qualitative or quantitative. All right, so let's take a look. Maybe I run an experiment where I'm going to flip a coin, and I'm going to flip it 5 times, and I'm interested in the number of heads obtained after flipping a coin 5 times. Okay? So you can think about that as like a question, right? Like I could say, how many heads did you get after you flipped the coin 5 times? And you can think about the different answers that you would give to a question like that. Well, you could maybe give an answer like 0, or I got 5 heads, or something like that, right? I got 2 heads. But notice that all of those are number responses, and so this variable would be quantitative, or what we'll often just abbreviate as quant. Okay? All right, let's see part B. Someone's favorite band. Again, imagine it as a question. What is your favorite band? Now think about the answers that you would give to a question like that, right? And what you would start to give is different band names. And that would then fall into a category of being qualitative, or what we'll often abbreviate as just qual. So I often think of these shorthand abbreviations here as an easy way to remember what each of these words stand for. Qualitative, is kind of like a quality, whereas quant is like a quantity or a number. Let's go through each of the rest of these. How about the number of cars that arrive at a McDonald's drive-thru from 12 to 1 p.m.? Again, reform it as a question in your mind. How many cars arrived at the McDonald's drive-thru? Well, I can clearly see then that this is going to be a variable that is quantitative. What about the distance a Toyota Prius can travel on a full tank of gas? Okay, well, again, I'm going to think about that as quantitative. Here's a tricky one, though. What about telephone numbers? Well, like, let's think about what a telephone number would look like, right? Like maybe ask you, what's your telephone number? And you say, well, it's 888 777 1122, right? Like maybe that's the number you give me. Okay, so I think we would all agree there are numbers that are in that particular telephone number, but here's the important thing. If I'm going to call this quantitative, it has to be the case that I can make meaningful additions and subtractions. Like, I could actually treat the thing that I have like a number. Like, would I ever imagine taking a telephone number and plugging it into a calculator and then doing mathematical operations with it? No, I really wouldn't. While this contains numbers, it doesn't really act like a number, and therefore we would still consider it qualitative. Now, you can actually probably think of a lot of other examples of things that are like this. You know, things like maybe like a social security number or your Harper ID number, or maybe an email address, right? Like my email address, knee with a 1 in it. It's got a number in it, and then of course, you know, at Harper College, blah, 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 blah. But like it's got a number in it, but itself is not a number. You could also think about like addresses to something, you know, like, I don't know, 1027 Main Street or something like that, right? Like these contain numbers, but they do not get treated like numbers, and therefore they still fall underneath that qualitative category. This is an important thing to be able to recognize when I'm working with a particular statistical question. Am I dealing with a qualitative or a quantitative variable? And we'll see this as a very important point as we move into not only videos in this section, but into much, much later sections and chapters in this course.